Alright, got a sorted llama here with a Doomfist VOD. I've been losing a lot of games in tank recently, my streak being 3-9. It feels like every game I try my best but can't seem to get an advantage. There's a lot of things I'm doing wrong, and so any all feedback is appreciated, thanks. No worries, so I did take a look over this as well, again, sticking with the new sort of VOD format I'm going with. I've got a couple of timestamps. This one's a little unique in that I think there isn't necessarily an overarching issue or like a really big glaring issue. I think there's just a lot of little misplays that are like stacking on top of each other and compiling and making like feeding into each other. The biggest thing I could pin it down to was forcing engages and managing space. And just to talk about forcing engages, this is two things. One, going in without your team, so thinking about where your team is. Two, what cooldowns we have available to us / HP. And I'll even go 3 and talk about engage zones as well, because there's obviously spaces where you just never really want to go as Doom. There's spaces that you can't go because of perhaps where your team is positioned and what CDs you have / depending on the map. Whenever we talk about Doom engages, the big thing to keep in mind is when you're planning them, think about how you're getting in and how you're getting out. And do we have high ground where we can sort of drop in and punch and then slam away? Or do we have to try and be creative with our slam angle to keep LOS cut of the enemy for as long as we can to avoid important abilities / taking unnecessary damage, and then try and punch our way out. Generally speaking, it is better to punch in and slam out, because if you punch in and then someone just tanks the punch, then you're stuck there without either of the cooldowns. You can't collide with people with slam. So it is better to do that. And they can both be stunned, so that is the only real difference between the two in terms of mobility, right? Another thing to remember is that power block is not a tool to charge your punch. That's a great added bonus that it has, and sometimes, depending on what they're playing, that can be the main use you get out of it. I don't know specifically what that comp would look like, but like there may be niche applications of it. But for the most part, it is a way to buy time for you to get your other cooldowns back off cooldown. So those are the main things we want to look at. But yeah, I have a few timestamps talking about this. The other thing was managing space. And that sort of feeds into engage zones as well. But space, basically, in terms of which ones we need to hold and which ones, and that is sort of denying their DPS, denying their backline, or enabling yours, right? What positions do you need to hold so that your backline can play in safe positions or powerful positions, and same with your DPS, and / what areas on the map are key for their DPS to hold / for their DPS to be able to find value, and how can we deny them being able to do that? And space, obviously, again, sort of engage zones, and down from that is staging. And staging is sort of another overarching theme in terms of we're trying to do almost too much at any given time, and it's leading to us having this, like, if we talk about Doom sort of going in, going out, and going in and going out, being very cyclical with his abilities, you're sort of extending the duration of these peaks, which is good in theory because you have more uptime, but then you're also making the downtime really long, and that's not ideal for Doomfist, because if you have these long periods where they can effectively live through this, if you don't find enough value in this, and then you have this really long downtime before your next peak, then they are just going to find a lot of value in here. It's always a question mark whether you're going to find value in this space, but they will find value in this space for sure, because it'll be a 5v4, and the tank is the worst thing to not have in a numbers disadvantage. So I'll leave that up just for a second if you want to screen grab that at all. But those are the main sort of things. So we'll go to our first timestamp, which is 1 to 50. Roundabouts here, we'll have a look. I'll let the player models load in and then try again. So good DMAC, good breaking the pylon. Nice rollout over the top, right? That's utilizing the cover of the high ground while you're going on this slam and slash cutting LOS. They think you're just going up here, but you actually managed to find some value from that. And then you've punched, and you punch out because you know you're in a safe spot in terms of you're getting support right now, right? So you don't mind this, and it's actually, considering where you landed, it's quite quick to get back to some natural cover and to safe positions. Like you can probably power block for the distance that this is. So I don't mind using both cooldowns there because it was a pretty passive dive, a pretty short range dive. But in general, we do want to follow the rule of having one to get in, one to get out. But right now, after we've done this, it's like, where can we be, right? When you talk about these engage zones like this, right? Or like your uptime. In this period, we still need to be able to find indirect value. And how Doomfist can do that is through his threat, right? To a squishy, Doomfist is scary, right? If you're stuck in a 1v1 with a Doomfist, that's an unfavorable 1v1 for a squishy. It's a favorable 1v1 for you. So if you can be threatening by just sitting in these areas, right? Because frontlining right now, yes, that might be scary to lower rank players who go like, oh, there's a Doomfist there, I don't want to go there. But to higher rank players who understand that you're down on cooldowns right now, they are aware that they can just take this space. They can press W. And so the scarier thing for those players is that if you're in these high grounds and just sitting here or occupying this space, that's going to stop them from finding off angles onto your team. If they push main, your team is reasonably well off in terms of being able to kite that engage, right? It's pretty telegraphed, they can see it coming. It's through main, so it's generally not a power position. You're never going to see main to be a high ground really, except for on some push maps. But regardless, if you're sitting up on here, yes, they can still press W, as they probably will, better players will, because they've seen you use the cooldowns. But as a backline player or as a squishy, this is threatening, right? You're scared to push up here and try and follow your tank in if you know at any point there's a Doomfist that can drop down, and keyword being drop down, so you can use both cooldowns if you see an opportunity to do so. You don't have to waste one to go in. That is scary. That is scary for a backline. And so this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about managing space, and specifically in relation to staging your engages. So yeah, this is the first key sort of timestamp I had. And we'll just watch a little bit more to see if there's anything else to talk about. Again, unlucky on the punch. That was pretty decent though. We're in good... We're utilizing cover well. And now again, this is good, right? Because these two heroes are going to thrive off being able to find their own angle onto a backline with a lot of natural cover, which is what a lot of high ground on this map is. Even Cassidy as well, right? And D.Va is going to do a lot to deny your DPS high grounds. So anytime you can occupy these spaces, that's going to give your DPS an advantage and your Alari an advantage as well, to be honest. It's good positions for both of these, and even Lifeweaver, for just increased survivability against a dive tank and some longer range heroes. And that was obviously less good. Why? We just dropped off the high ground without being forced off of it, and then face tanked a lot of damage, and then had all of our cooldowns forced. So right now, if we're talking about this peak, this is when we have cooldowns, right, at this point, and then this is where we go in. We just didn't have this peak we didn't find any value from it. In fact, we might have even gone slightly lower because we lost the high ground. But that's all I'm going to talk about that timestamp. Next one is 420. Roundabouts, so we'll just watch this. Oh, I think I meant to timestamp a little earlier, actually. I just want to talk about, again, going on this sort of uptime, you need to make sure you're never jeopardizing quality over quantity. Because right now, and throughout this entire sort of timestamp clip, you have this crazy amount of uptime, or like you're really like extending the duration of this engagement to where you're never really out and resetting and getting your cooldowns and then looking to put pressure on diveable targets, favorable 1v1s. And it's demanding, not only is it taking away the threat, like they're playing very freely right now. If you're seeing an Alari play right in front of you, a Lifeweaver play right in front of you, you know that you're missing the mark on Doomfist, because that's just insult to your gameplay, right? They should be scared of you. They should be always checking over their shoulder like, oh, I'm scared to push up because the Doom could be lurking around. Not to say that you don't find value in contesting cart and sometimes frontlining, but that's more in a case where they're playing like a grouped up composition in which you're more playing for like an AoE pressure sort of playstyle, where you're constantly finding big slams on multiple targets, punches on multiple targets. And potentially that's when you might use power block before going in to charge up your punch, and then have it almost off cooldown when you go in case you need it to survive. But in this case, when they're not grouped up, when they are playing a more split comp in terms of soldiers always running around the map on his own, trying to find off angles, Alari is probably looking to do a lot of damage more than healing, because she's got a heal bot support duo, and Cass is obviously a bit scary because of his hinder nade, but these two and Soldier are very favorable 1v1s for Doom, so we need to be doing our best to always be threatening to them. And right now, all three of them are standing in front of you, not scared at all. So that can be a little bit of an indicator. But I'll just continue to let it play out. And you can just see, like, I think I rewound it to about 410, and we're still not out, and we're still, like, never really getting quite to full HP. And that was 16 seconds. Like, that's a long engage. So just be a little more cyclical, right? It might have just been a case of go in, look for a kill, force some abilities, or get the kill, either or. Get out, live, hide behind cover, get topped up, and then let your supports do other things, like maybe even play in better positions so the monkey can't pressure them, and then go back in. Maybe you use power block to bait out hinder nade, and then that gives you a much easier engage on your next, like, uptime, right? So yeah. Now we'll look at C defense, and I've got a couple of timestamps for this because I think you force a lot of engages that just aren't on. You're already pretty low, so I might even rewind this a little bit further back. Obviously diving a Cass, a little bit risky because of this hinder nade. You're going to power block, but it's going to just take up a lot of damage. And see, you didn't even get to use the punch, right? But that was a better use of power block, right? It made you stay alive, and yeah, you shouldn't have been in there to begin with, because Cass is probably not the most favorable 1v1 unless you've seen him use his hinder nade, or he's incredibly isolated from his targets because from his team. Because if he's going to hinder you, make sure he's the only one that can damage you while you're super immobile. That's really important. If you're going to take an unfavorable 1v1, make sure it's a 1v1, not a 1v3 or a 1v4, right? But yeah, so sort of just force that. We'll force our team to misposition, and now everyone is really unhealthy because they're trying to top you up. Genji's really deep at the moment. We slam in, play this cover a bit. And I'll just let it play out because the timestamp's quite close. 5:30 is the next one. Yeah, this was just a little bit ambitious, I'll say. Using 2 cooldowns to punch the monkey away in midair, when we can just like charge up a punch and then hit him like a second before he hits the ground, right? Because even if you hit him, yeah, you force him out, but he also hasn't really committed to that dive, so you've just traded 2 cooldowns for his 6-second cooldown. It's not a great trade, and then obviously the risk versus reward, it didn't pay off this time. I don't mind going for like plays like this, but just make sure you're calculated with them. Even just slamming to the left of him. Was this it? Yeah, that's where we died. So even just when we see him go up here, instead of jumping right at him, maybe jumping up to here and then slamming him into this wall, right? That way, if you're going to miss the punch, at least you're not going to end up in Narnia over here somewhere. Right, so be calculated, put some thought into it, don't rush it. Because that's essentially what is happening in these clips, is we're forcing these engages. 530 was the next one, but you're dead, so I must have missed time. Oh, 550, sorry. And this engage as well, unfavorable 1v1, not even a 1v1, 1v2, because even if Valari wasn't there, it's a pylon, he's getting pylon healing, that may as well be a 1v2, right? Sucks to be a dive tank or a flanker at the moment with Valari's pylon. But this is bad, right? Because the thing with unfavorable 1v1s is it's an uphill battle. It's unlikely you're going to find value. It's unlikely that you're going to get this kill. And so all you've done is trade CDs for space. But what value is this space? Like, is it enabling your DPS? No, not really. No one's really going to play through here. Maybe the Cass would. But you would only then contest this space if he was contesting this, like turning this into a 2v1 rather than a Cass 1v1, right? This doesn't do a lot of space, and it's not particularly valuable to their team, right? Only right now in this moment when Card is sort of rounding this corner does this become an off angle with a lot of cover that can provide some value, but it's also still really long range, and it's not something that Cass is going to easily be able to get picks or value from. So just a misjudgment on an engage, we'll say, because it's not necessarily a space that we want, and it's definitely not a matchup that we want. And you even get block forced here, and what I think this is going to do is going to feed into your next dive. So great dive opportunity, right? Favorable 1v1. She's used cooldowns. She's really weak. Even if she's not weak, this is still more favorable 1v1 than something like Cass or a tank. So great, right? And then we'd like to punch away, but then we get hindered. And we get power block forced again, but it's too late, right? Like we could have done this knowing the Cass is there and then power blocked now, soaked up his damage and his nade, and then punched away and lived. But instead we sort of forced it. We went in without power block and not totally topped up on HP, and we get punished for it. And that stems from this first engage that wasn't great, right? A couple more. 820. This is something that I actually wanted to point out, which was quite good, which is what I was talking about before, where there's two main playstyles to Doom, which is going assassin mode, going real hard on the backline, being a threat, right? And then there's the other one, which is just playing space really well and forcing a lot of abilities and absorbing a lot of pressure for your team to capitalize on. And you do that absorbing pressure and AoE pressure through your slam on clumped up compositions, or just teams that play grouped up. You can punish them for that, because it's harder to play that sort of assassin playstyle. But right here is a great example of how you can do that, right? I would have liked to have seen a slam first, just because it's going to get a lot of people in it, because of the bigger radius than just the punch being anyone who's close to whoever you hit, and that would have granted you a lot of shields and could have opened up opportunities to go deeper if you wanted to. As it stands, so you only get a little bit of shields because you only really hit 2 people, maybe a third one. No, he's just throwing flashbang. You only hit 2 people out of 5, whereas you could have hit at least 4. But then this is putting out a lot of pressure. You power block, then you get your slam back, you charge up your punch from the power block, which is good, but you just got to be careful still to not over-aggress in that situation. But it was still really good. That was a great play, and it bought a lot of space, and it denied a lot of space, and ends up capping the point. I have another one at 850, so I'll just let it play out. So again, what does this space provide to your team? What does it provide to theirs? Virtually nothing, right? It might when the payload is rounding this corner, because it might be, again, a little off angle for your DPS to take, or your supports to take. But rarely will you see the DPS from their team or the backline of their team aggress through this position, because their power positions are on the high grounds that are up here. So as Doom, the second we cap this point, even before when we were walking out, after having forced them out, and we know we've capped point, like the Reaper is doing. The Reaper was being proactive. He teleported up here. There was no one up here. He's dropping and he's pushing a different route. We should be up here, right? The second this fight is, force out this monkey if you want. Just be careful not to aggress too much, but you can take this position and make them force you out. Make them waste cooldowns to get rid of you until this payload sort of rounds the corner, because what did we talk about at the start was your team, your CDs slash health pool and engage zones, and sort of slash space, because right here is a good space. We don't have LOS of our team. We do have our CDs, so we're like 2 ticks out of 3, but it's not enough to go like really hard in, unless the added little asterisk on this thing might be ultimate, right? Because ultimate allows you to get a free engage, use all of your abilities for that engage, and then get out. You just got to be careful about hinder nade, because that does cancel ultimate as well. But the second your team gets an LOS of here, then go to town, right? You have everything you need. Obviously, ideally, you would have ticks on all 3 things. I get that can't always happen in a ranked game, but it's still, right now, where we are now, right, we just have the CDs and the HP, and playing through this position, we don't have our team here, and we don't have, this isn't a good space. We're not contesting a valuable space. So yeah, 9-10 was the next one. So I might just let that play out as well. It's good, force the monkey out. Okay, so I know you want to kill these people. You see them and you're like, oh, I can kill these people, they're on the leg, unpunishable, they're right in front of me, maybe I'll shoot them. We'll reiterate, unfavorable 1v1 because of hinder nade, and he has roll, so he can even dodge our abilities, and he has a fair amount of damage, especially at close range. He can still fan the hammer. So unfavorable, right? Plus, it's a 1v2. Whereas on the high ground right next to us is a 1v1, and a favorable one at that. She may use her abilities to come help, but then you've opened up the rest of your team to take a 4v1 against this Cassidy, right? And if she doesn't, then you just straight up, you can kill this guy before she even has a chance to do anything as well. But even bigger picture than that is the fact that this guy is the guy that's posing a threat to your team. This soldier on the high ground is the one that's posing a threat to the rest of these guys, right? They can't push up until he is dealt with, so they need to do that. And they're going to be doing that instead of helping you go in on this engage. And these guys also don't have any chance of posing a threat to your team. At least not right now, not in this current moment, and not as much as the soldier who's on a high ground, right? Valuable space, and posing a threat to your team. So just make sure our target focus is refined to those things about, this is, and if nothing else, recognizing, like we're talking about, that this is the space that you need to control right now. all these high grounds are spaces that you need to control, and the rest will follow behind you. And like even right now, right? Like you can be positioned on this high ground. What does high ground allow you to do? It allows you to just drop onto the team and not have to use a cooldown. It's the same thing with Monkey, right? Anytime Monkey can use high ground to close the gap on his targets, so he doesn't have to use jump, it makes it infinitely easier to escape and live and even go deeper if he wants to. So you really need to start thinking about where you're positioning and what areas of the map you're controlling. Because that is the essence of tank, is controlling space. And we do it now, which is good, but it's reactive, right? And we had to use a cooldown as part of our engage, but to get up there, and now we don't have another one to go even deeper, right? If we were already up here, we could have either slammed still and then punched him into our team, slammed behind him and punched him in, or we could have punched him against the wall, and if he runs away, then we go for a slam. Either of the options, right? And like we don't need to drop right now. Like we can punish this Alari for frontlining and right in front of us, or we can keep the high ground to go punish this Lifeweaver that's playing on the back high. And see, now you're doing it, but it's too late, right? We've missed our timing. The next time step ahead was 11:40. We're getting close to the end here. Yeah. So don't mind this position. We'd like to see you go force this soldier and Lifeweaver off this, or soldier and Alari, sorry, off this high ground. But you need to chill at the moment, right? Like you don't need to stage onto this high ground to contest this one. We can just walk out of this room and then sit in here, not take any damage, wait for our supports to have LOS, and then we jump up and we slam. Right. Because then they only have, from the time that we get above this edge and onto them, for them to shoot us, rather than all the way from here to shoot us, and just they're already shooting us before we've even started aggressing. But I think you miss this duel happening to your left. You hear the Cass punished and try and go for it, but we missed it. We missed the opportunity. And part of that is recognizing the space, right? You can walk up here, and not to deny their DPS, right? Like this area here doesn't do a lot for them, but clearing out this high ground for your DPS, and then maybe you just walk through to where the Lifeweaver is, and then you jump over to this high ground, and then you can punch them further in, right? So learning how to make rotations through the map, learning what space you need to control. That's what I need to keep getting at. And I suppose I've found my core issue while I've been just running through this VOD, which is think about the spaces you're controlling. And 14:40 is the last timestamp I've got on here. Which is good because we're coming up on half an hour now. Oh yeah, and this is just another example. I'll reiterate my point. Right now, this is good, right? You're controlling this space. You're controlling this angle to pick from. You're forcing them to rotate through the back here. This is fine. But we end up going even deeper without ult as well, which is quite dangerous, and without our team, without LOS of our team. You're obviously getting healing now, and I do want to point this out. You're getting support, but where you're forcing your backline to have to play to get LOS of you, compare these two positions. Because, yeah, they may sit on cart regardless. We don't know the quality of them as a player. But if they're thinking about their positioning as these two supports, specifically the Ana, who should probably be on high ground behind me on the bridge, or playing through here, this is a much easier position for them to get LOS of you. And if we're talking about off angles for their DPS, this space and this space are much more off angles onto this fight than walking through here is, because this is establishing a front line. This will be an off angle. It's rare that the team will come out and force this because they're not ready, right? Cart's going to get to about here before they come out. And if they establish a front line like this, then we're chilling, because our team should hopefully be in good positions to be able to fight that. But we don't need an off angle. We're going to leave this zone anyway. So if they were to establish this as a front line and rotate out through here, all that's done is split you from your team. And no one is going to use this space now if they rotate out here. Whereas if left to their own devices, if you weren't anywhere, if you were back here, they'd be able to use both of them, but this one is the one that would provide more value to their DPS. But yeah, that's the main things I have to say. So think about your CD usage, how you get in, how you get out, and think about what space you're controlling, not only for your team, but what space you're denying for theirs. That's the biggest takeaway I think I can give you. And make sure you're not rushing your engages, right? Make sure you have your cooldowns ready. Make sure you have your HP topped up, and make sure you're forcing favorable 1v1s, and make sure they are 1v1s, not 1v2s or 1v3s, and unfavorable ones at that, because that's hard to do, but just try your best, and practice how you can use your abilities to make that happen. But yeah, I hope that helps, and all the best with your games.